Welcome back to this mini-series on values and beliefs. In our first part, we looked at self-awareness and the ways our brain's physical makeup interacts with our life experiences to shape our sense of self. In part 2, we explored the concept of vulnerability and how being tightly boundaried around vulnerability is fundamental. In today's episode, we're talking about compassion and, like vulnerability, how it has its basis firmly rooted in boundaries. So let's start by finding a definition of the word compassion. In etymological terms, the word is divided into two and literally means to suffer with. So to view someone compassionately is about being able to experience and understand someone else's position from their point of view. So compassion, therefore, is the willingness to sit with someone in their pain and say, I see you. It's also about making the conscious choice to remain free of judgment of that person. Saying to someone, that's hard that you had that argument with Bob. But if only you'd done X, Y, and Z, you wouldn't be where you are now. Started out well, kind of fell at the second hurdle. The compassionate thing to do would be to leave that sentence at the halfway point. That's hard that you had that argument with Bob. When we make judgments, even privately, about other people's situations, we're not truly being compassionate, even when we keep those opinions to ourselves, although perhaps that's a good start at least. Compassion, like a muscle in the body, takes time to develop. Concepts are easier to conceive than they are to perform, so perhaps the key here is to think more of the time, not all of the time. Like mindfulness or meditation, it takes practice to become compassionate. So how do we know how and when to be compassionate? Because at the moment, it sounds like we need to forgive people or feel sorry for them when they behave in certain ways, trying to find ways to justify why they do certain things. So yes, people do things that can be harmful to us, and so trying to find compassion for those actions can be really hard. In order to be compassionate, we need to take a step back from the situation and really try to understand what must be going on for that person in order for them to behave that way. Are they acting from a place of fear? From a place of anger, which I would almost always argue is the same as fear, just a more physicalized version of it. When we see people committing crimes, and I mean really serious atrocities, our initial response might be to say, what a monster, what a this, what a that. Our tolerance for seemingly inhuman behaviour makes us dissociate so much that we even dehumanize the person who committed that act by calling them monsters. We dissociate from them as humans because in order to accept that a human being could behave in such a way means that, well, under the same conditions, we could commit the same atrocity. The compassionate way is to take a step back and ask, wow, what must have happened in their life to have got them to that point? But in exactly the same way that we talked about vulnerability last time, we need to be tightly boundaried around our compassion. There may be people in our lives who have hurt us, and for whatever reason, they may still be in our lives, be they a relative or a fellow student or a colleague. Having a compassionate approach might look like, I understand that you did that thing that hurt me because of events that have happened to you that shaped your values and beliefs as a person. And then comes the boundary. But that does not mean that I will allow you to continue to behave that way towards me in the future. Following it up with a condition that we must be willing to go through with, if this happens again, then such and such will happen, can be a great way to show up as someone who has self-respect as well as vulnerability. Compassion requires self-awareness, vulnerability, and boundaries. Being able to understand and cultivate our values around compassion and practicing it steadily and mindfully can lead us towards living a more authentic life. We'll talk more about authenticity next time. I look forward to seeing you then.